Good afternoon, colleagues. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this event co-organized by the Global Cities Hub and the Red Cross and Red Crescent Climate Center. My name is Antu Duong, and I will moderate this event today. I am the co-director of the Global Cities Hub. A few things for you to know for this event. It will be held in English only. It is being recorded so that people who cannot attend can watch the recording afterwards. So just for those who don't know the Global Cities Hub, we are an organization with two main objectives. The first one is to connect local and regional governments to international debates and processes on global health, human rights, digitalization, humanitarian affairs, many areas actually. And one of the major events that we are supporting here in Geneva is the UN Forum of Mayors, which will actually take place this fall. That's our first objective. And the second objective is, as you may know, the world urbanizes very rapidly. And we promote the urban, so to say, on the agenda of the international community so that the international community better takes the urban into account in its policy work, in its program and activities. And the event today is part of this effort. When we look at climate change and extreme weather events such as heat waves, we want to make sure that an urban lens is applied and that we look at the specificity of the urban environment when we deal with extreme heat. So as you all know, 2023 was the hottest year on record. Extreme heat poses great risks to cities, and these risks only worsen with global warming. Cities are already warmer than their rural areas due to the heat island effect. And as the world urbanizes, more and more people actually are impacted by extreme heat, and that will unfortunately only increase. So I'm very pleased to collaborate with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Climate Center to discuss today how cities may beat the heat. Without further ado, let me give the floor to Aynur, who will help set the scene and open the event. Aynur, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Antu, and thanks for organizing this event and inviting me. And thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Aynur Kadasanoğlu, and I work at the Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Center, and also Global Disaster Preparedness Centers. These are two reference centers of the Global Red Cross and Red Crescent Network. And I would like to start with saying that this is a very special time for us since we are getting closer to the third edition of the Heat Action Day. On this Sunday, June 2nd, I will put the link and an email address in the chat, and please get in touch with us. There's still time to join. This year's theme is urban art and towards heat, of course. And we already have hundreds of organizations signed up, cities like London, Washington, DC, universities, in addition to the Red Cross, Red Crescent branches. So I hope that you will also join us. Like you said, Antu, this year, last year was the hottest year on record, and it looks like 2024 is going to break that record. And today, just today, we released one of the new reports, attribution reports, that scientifically confirms that in 2023, almost a month of extra extreme heat days added and affecting hundreds of millions of people. And this is one of the science legs of the work streams of the Climate Center, looking at extreme events, weather events in general, not just heat, but trying to scientifically showcase that these events couldn't have happened without the impact of climate change. So please check it out. I will put the link also in the chat. So this is just an example of the science work that we are doing, apart from the policy, practice and innovation work that Climate Center is known for. But I have to say that urban and extreme heat is two flagship programs of the Climate Center and also the IFRC as a network. We are working increasingly in urban areas, trying to help communities prepare for, be aware of it, understand the risk, because risk perception is one of the biggest barriers. And I believe probably Joyce will speak to that. I know her research background is, but it is super important to understand that perceptions of risk, heat risk, is one of the biggest barriers, as I said, and we have to address that before we even think about what the actions could be to make sure that those actions actually reach to people's mind. Apart from this research and helping the cities prepare heat action plans, what as the Red Cross, we are gearing up to play an important role in addressing the heat risk in urban areas. That includes leading locally led adaptation plans, setting up or strengthening early warning systems that are inclusive and based on scientific research, organizing information campaigns, and also facilitating processes, co-design processes to develop locally relevant, adaptable, viable solutions. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists about these solutions in the coming minutes. I will stop here, maybe come back to the solutions part later, Antu, but just a reminder that I will put all the links in the chat. Please check them out. Thank you, and over to you, Antu.
Thank you so much, Ainur. And indeed, we'll have time to go back later to what the movement exactly does to assist cities and local communities to fight the heat. Thanks for those introductory remarks, Ainur, and setting the scene and basically framing our event today in Heat Action Day that is taking place on 2nd of June this year, and that will hopefully repeat every year so that we raise awareness about heat and how to fight it, actually. Let's dive now into the topic and start with our distinguished female speakers. Very proud of this all-women panel. We'll start with Bushra. Bushra, you're the Chief Heat Officer of the city of Dhaka North in Bangladesh, which is one of the biggest and most densely populated city in South Asia. Yesterday at another event, we had the mayor of Dhaka South, who told us that you have about 20 million people, actually, and that following the big heat wave that you had in April, you're now suffering from cyclones. So I hope you're safe there. So Bushra, you have been appointed a year ago, and more cities appoint chief heat officers to lead cities' response in a unified manner, I would say. So Bushra would be very keen to hear about your work to embed heat resilience within people's mind, but also within the city administration as such. Could you please explain the context, the challenges that you face at municipal level, and refer to some initiatives that you've been implementing to beat the heat in Dhaka? The floor is yours, Bushra.
Thank you so much. And thank you. That was a very nice introduction. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Ms. Ainur. And it's so nice to meet you, Joyce. And it's so nice to see you again, Dr. Nausheen. I think I want to start by saying that, in 1 year, we have come from having very little knowledge on what extreme heat is and the fact that extreme heat can be dangerous and fatal. Well, I feel like we've all acknowledged that extreme heat can be dangerous, but we haven't reached the fatal part yet, just because we don't have any mortality data on heat. So that is something that I'm actually looking into. I'm pushing for with different stakeholders to do a study that will analyze heat, health, and mortality, looking at the last few years, especially because we have we've kind of the first thing that we kind of did is
Sorry,
the-
can I stop you? Because the sound is cut and is not very clear when you speak. Would you mind? Sorry, it's very radical,
Okay.
but would you mind off your video so that the connection is a little bit better?
Is that better?
Yeah, let's try this way. Sorry,
Okay.
please go on.
Sure. So what we've started off by doing is identifying the challenges that we had faced. So lack of awareness, lack of data, lack of collaboration between different stakeholders that are relevant to this issue, and of course a total lack of policy or structure that would deal with not just extreme heat but resilience, climate resilience as a whole. We but at the same time we have developed a lot of disaster responsiveness towards cyclones and flooding, because that has historically been the norm. Whenever we think of climate change in the past, it was never about extreme heat. It was always about, well, in the cities or in the coastal regions, it was never, it was more about cyclones and flooding. And in the last 2 years, especially since 2023, we have really experienced a new a shift in that understanding, and more people are coming to terms with the extremities of extreme, well, the danger of extreme heat. So as I said, so what we started off is by trying to address those challenges that we identified at the beginning. We approached a lot of people because the city of Dhaka isn't when you think of a city, you think of the mayor and city officials and city corporation. But in Bangladesh, especially the way our local government is set up, the city is just one of the actors in this municipality. There are roads and building developing agencies and authorities. There's electric authorities, there's gas, there's water, all of these resources that are very essential. These are very essential services of the municipality. They are not all under the city. And therefore and when you think about heat, you have to understand that heat affects all of these issues in a very connected way. And when you try to address one of them, like maybe you're trying to address the ones that are within the city's purview, but then with it comes this question of, okay, but this is connected to that other issue, but that one is under the other governing authority, like water. Okay, we need more water accessibility, so now you have to get permission and go through all this systemic challenges just to get, and the different stakeholders on the other side are not always aligned at an actionable level. Like we have all been in panels together, we have all been in conferences together where we've committed to a lot. We've committed to locally led adaptation and sustainability and forward thinking and future building and all of these buzzwords, but I see very little action at once those events are over and once life, and it just becomes like business as usual. So it's really tough to change these existing systems. There's a lot of pushing, and what I quickly realized is that simply being a chief heat officer in a city that doesn't really have that foundational structure, it's not enough. You need to institutionalize heat action within the city corporation and within the other governing agencies and authorities that are also part of the footprint of the city, part of the decision makers for the city. And it's been quite a process. It's been quite challenging, and at the same, and all of this, honestly, it's sad because at the heart of all of this work is public health. We want to protect, as chief heat officer, I am here to protect people, and the most vulnerable people at that, because heat doesn't affect everybody equally. There is such a huge wealth, unequal wealth distribution in this country, in the city especially, and with people with different income levels, education levels, different sociocultural norms. For example, I come from I come from a modest family, but if I'm in public, I don't cover up. I don't wear a niqab or a burqa. But a lot of women do, and men can just take off layers when they feel hot, but women don't. So these are just very sensitive challenges that we've had to be I've had to be very mindful about, because I can't just go up to some lady and be like, take off your clothes, you know what I mean? So it's even though I've often wanted to say that, and I have had family members who are on the conservative side who fainted in front of me during heat season, and I've once they fainted, I did have to take off their layers and layers of clothing. And so that is another challenge, I would say, like the religious aspect. So as I said, social cultural norms, and it affects women. So therefore it affects women much more, women, girls. And then you have what I was mentioning before, water accessibility. So women in my country don't drink enough water because they've been conditioned from when they were little girls that public washrooms aren't safe, they're unclean, they smell. So just when you're going out, don't drink water. When that might have worked until now, but now with changing temperatures, with rising temperatures, it's no longer safe to do that. So we have to not just on the city side, like not just build more washrooms, which we are doing, but also enable women to feel empowered to use washrooms, and there needs to be this this information needs to go out, that if you don't take up space in the city, if you don't rest, if you don't drink water, then your life will be at danger. It's not the same situation as you have lived with. This is a new, completely different world that we're living in now. And we have to adapt, and part of that is to take care of ourselves, and to push ourselves into doing things that we're not used to. And so we've been trying to come up with a booklet. We are currently designing one. We are almost at the end of that. If it was fully designed, I would have been able to show you, but it's not ready yet. But this is a heat safety and awareness booklet that is part of a heat awareness campaign, which is kind of like an information campaign, but it also comes with these portable hand fans that we have designed, which only weighs 13 grams. So it's very lightweight, it's very portable, and it fits in the palm of your hand. And so small, and it opens into a larger fan with messages written on it to protect yourself, and to the 4 basic elements of heat safety. So it tells you that, and then so with the booklet and the fan, we are conducting an RCT survey, kind of like a baseline knowledge, attitudes, and practices survey on 20,000 households across Dhaka North. And we are also going to combine that with an online survey, because we will have a control group in the beginning who will not get, unfortunately, the booklets or the fans. But this is important to understand where people's existing, what people currently know about heat, and whether these kinds of awareness campaigns will actually work, whether these are useful, and whether they can be scaled up in the future. We are also going to implement another study, which is a vulnerability assessment. As I said, we need to learn more about data, about heat exposure, about heat-related illnesses, especially how it affects marginalized groups and their incomes. I think that these are some of the things that I'm working on. I don't know if I have enough time to go into everything, but yes, lots of challenges, but also lots of solutions. And maybe if you guys would like to know more, send me an email and I can tell you all about it.
Thank you so much, Bushra. Just one more thing that we discussed when we were preparing the event, I think, was the urban greening. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if do I have time to get into that?
2 more minutes, just for the trees.
Okay.
I thought it was
the other challenge that we have faced, apart from lack of like working in silos and political systems and bureaucracy, is we have, as the city of Dhaka has experienced a complete what should I say, a barrage of deforestation and loss of water bodies. We have I think we have lost 80% and 100% of our green corridor, like green spaces and water bodies like canals, respectively. And to combat that, we have been undertaking a lot of we have been aggressively pursuing nature-based solutions. So a lot of the water bodies we've lost because people have illegally occupied it or built over it or just thrown garbage on it. Recently, the mayor did an exhibition, a waste exhibition, where in front of the city corporation, where all the stuff that he pulled out of the canals, he kind of arranged them all in front of the city corporation. So there were toilets and beds and sofas and TVs and refrigerators and mattresses and blankets and pillows and china and like dishware and statues and stuff, all in the they were all in the canal. Just give me 1 second. Hi, baby. Can you please go to Mika's? She's watching TV. Go. Sorry, my daughter is here. So we had this exhibition just to show the city people that just to show the public that this is something that's happening. This is something that's causing a lot of dengue, and this is something that's causing so much pollution and clogging up our canals and water bodies. And we've, on the other hand, aside from cleaning out the canals, we've also been excavating them to get rid of all the built up land that have illegally been filled there. And then on the other hand, we are also restoring wetlands. So I don't know how many of you know about the Heatwaves project, but that was all built up and it is now a very large wetland. It was done to help with flooding, but it is also a heat, it really helps with heat. The surrounding areas we have seen are much cooler than the other places. So we really want to push for more places like this. We want to push for more water bodies across the city because Dhaka North especially was a city of greenery and water bodies. And so to bring back greenery, what we're pushing for what we're piloting actually are 2 urban forests. So this was inspired by the Miyawaki concept. So a lot of investment, a lot of soil preparation work, a lot of close attention to selecting the tree species, making sure they're very local, native to our climate, and bringing back some of the species we have lost due to deforestation. We're paying close attention to the relationship between each species and how, who is planted next to whom, and making sure that it's a very multi-layered kind of forest. We have in one of them we have over 170 species with a total quantity of 40,000 trees, and the other one has 190 species with a total quantity of 35. We have strategically selected the locations, although we didn't have much choice because Dhaka is so built up, but we strategically selected them in like abandoned spaces almost, which were illegal truck stands that we had restored, or a piece of land that used to have a lot of trees in it, but due to building roads and due to building flyovers and overbridges, the trees were all cut down. So we're kind of like afforestation and reforestation in each location, and it is expected, with 3 years of maintenance, it is expected to be self-sustaining. So through this process, we are also trying to make sure that we are able to employ people, kind of have a permanent team at the city corporation that who will be called forest guardians, whose job will be to take care of these forests every day. So watering them, making sure that the mulching is replenished, making sure that any fallen saplings are straightened, making sure that there's no garbage in there, making sure nobody's going into this area. And we also have planned some seeding around the forest, not inside, but around it, so that people can take shade and also have water accessibility there. Yeah, I think that's a good summary. And at the same time, we also have made these spaces non-smoking, so that it's more friendlier for women. We have a really big problem of women, as I think I mentioned already, that women don't like to take up space in our city. Most women try to get from point A to point B as fast as possible, occupying as little space as possible. And in heat season, this is not recommended recommended because you are supposed to rest, you're supposed to sit down and take a drink of water, sit in the shade, and then continue your journey. So I want to make sure that these are spaces that they can use instead of them being spaces where men are just taking up a lot of space, which usually happens in these areas. Yeah. And I think that covers it. What do you say?
Thank you, Bushra.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
perfect. Thank you so much. And sorry, I've asked you to switch off your video. You can switch it on again. Sorry, there was an issue with the
No, it's
sound.
fine. I would rather turn it, keep it off.
We really understood the breadth of the challenges that, you know, a city like Dhaka has to face in terms of cultural, religious, you know, constraints, as well as just the municipal administration and other authorities dealing with many services that are being basically has to be involved in fighting the heat and the lack of competencies that you have there. So thanks a lot for telling us about this. In spite of that, we, however, understand measures to somehow enable women, but also the rest of the population to be more resilient to heat. Well, hopefully we'll have time to come back to you. I see that there are loads of questions. Yeah. Lots of interest. Thank you so much. We'll continue with our panel and then we'll go to the Q&A after our panelists have talked. Joyce, let me continue with you. You are a climate scientist working in the new field of weather attribution that is relying on scientific evidence to attribute extreme weather events to climate change. And I think I would like to refer to the report that was mentioned earlier by Ainur on assessing the risks and impact of extreme heat, that I think hopefully the link is in the chat. So Joyce, could you please introduce the issue of heat risks perception that has been mentioned by both Ainur and both Bushra, that heat risk perception is a real issue basically when we're trying to addressing extreme heat. What are the issues with heat risk perception in urban context? What are the specific challenges for cities and their urban dwellers, both at the individual but also societal level? You have the floor, Joyce.
Thank you so much. And I am really excited to be here today to speak about the kind of work that I do. And I think I want to share I think I have 2 slides to be easy to follow the conversation with 2 or 3 slides, which I would speak without them, but I think just having something visual that people can look at would be
would be happy to circulate them afterwards if you want to.
Yeah, okay. I think it's been, so you've introduced me. I am a climate scientist. I work with the World Weather Attribution. We are, it's an initiative of global scientists from around the world where we respond to extreme events as they happen. So in an aftermath of an extreme event, we really want to understand how much has climate change played a role. So to what extent has climate change sort of modified the frequency or the magnitude of that particular event? So be it a heat wave, be it a drought, be it extreme rainfall that resulted in flooding. So to what extent? So we are sort of doing the quantification. And we think that is very important because then it really raises awareness and it's good to like sort of inform policy and sort of tell us where we are and what we need to do. And I think it's also important to do it immediately after an event happens because it's still fresh in people's mind. So whether it's the general members of public or policymakers, it's really fresh in people's mind. People still remember how many people died, for example, how many homes were lost, how many property, like what kind of property was destroyed, what kind of infrastructure was destroyed. So we think having that analysis as rapid as possible, as soon as possible, is very important. So that's what we do at WWA. But I think a lot has been said as well about last year being one of the craziest years on record. It was one of the hottest years on record. We're still seeing a consecutive 11 months of record-breaking heat, starting last year, mid last year till April. And we are, of course, at record high CO2 concentrations of 419 parts per million, which tells you, of course, that we are not on track. We are continually warming our planet, and that's why we are continually seeing record-breaking heat events happening. And so just to go to our discussion today, I would, or the topic that I wanted to focus on today, which is really on heat perceptions and sort of the work that I'm doing. As we know for sure that there is huge rapid urbanization in the global south. And what comes with that is actually really the growth of informal settlements. And that we are seeing huge inequality in exposure, in heat exposures within cities. And if I can use an example, of course, of like, I'm from Kenya, and for cities in Kenya, like the capital, Nairobi, you find that most people actually live in settings that are like shown in panel 1 and B, and a bit of the minority live in sort of the posh, suburban, nice places shown in panel 3. And so then it means most people who live in these areas that have poor access to cooling facilities, sort of also health facilities, very crowded spaces as well, really suffer a lot from heat exposure. And so even with that as well is that they actually very low perceptions of heat. And in most cases in the global south, and speaking of Africa specifically, is that there's very little reporting and documentation of impacts. And I can tell you, even from the world weather attribution studies that we do, so we have sort of a trigger system where we use to sort of understand or like decide, it helps us to decide on what events we want to look at, because of course there's so many extreme events happening. So that trigger mechanism that we have, most studies that trigger in our system from Africa or the global south, especially heat, they actually go unstudied. And it's because one of our main sort of motivation or a trigger mechanism for our studies is actually linking it to the impacts. So to us, we just don't want to look at like understand heat or do attribution of heat in places where we don't understand the impacts. We feel it's really important to have our analysis or our studies attached to the impacts. And so then it means for regions where the impacts are not reported, they are not properly documented, there are huge gaps in documentation, or there's just no databases that like elaborate or robust databases that exist that we could use. It means in those regions, we don't do attribution studies. And so today I wanted to share some of the work that I've been doing in this regard. Understanding about these low perceptions, lack of perceptions, one other main thing as well really is that there are no heat wave definitions. Yeah, there are no standard heat wave definitions that can be used, because you have to have heat wave so that for you to develop like heat early warnings, you have to understand, so what do we mean by heat in a particular region or in a particular city, right? And so then that I found out that it actually doesn't exist, and it's one of the main issues. It's one of the problems. And so back in 2022, I did some work where I identified local thresholds of heat in 3 urban cities in Kenya. And so I was looking at what particular thresholds of heat would it somehow start resulting in health impacts. And I worked very closely with health practitioners to really understand and look at particular seasons or particular years or seasons where there was excessive heat, and really to see what is the sort of the correlation with, say, emergency visits, hospitalizations, or mortalities. And that was a really good piece of work that I did, and we were able to define thresholds for 3 cities in Kenya. And after that, now I've used some of the results from that work to build into more work that I'm doing now. One of them is developing heat early warnings for Nairobi informal settlements. So we are now routinely actually issuing early warnings to informal settlements in Nairobi, because it's a very unique setting where we really thought we needed to focus on those communities and try to speak with them, to understand, to learn from them, to have this sort of co-production. And so even with us going with our thresholds and definitions to them, we want to understand if it really makes any sense for us to tell them that they're likely to be experiencing, say, 32 degrees of temperature for 5 consecutive days, right? So having that information and asking them if that information is useful to them. And the other study that I'm doing, which is actually on climate change, attribution and vulnerability in Kenya, I'm looking at still 2 cities, but this time I also want to, I'm adding extra 2 counties because I want to understand sort of the compounding effect of drought and heat in those regions, because you find that during drought episodes or drought seasons, a lot of heat, a lot of the impacts that are actually reported is compounded with the excessive heat that people experience in those regions as well. So you find that there's quite, and women actually are quite much disappropriately affected in that sense, because they are out in the farms, or they are mainly trying to look for food for their kids and all that. And the other work that I also started currently doing is we want to develop EAT plans for Nairobi City, EAT action plans for Nairobi City. And we are doing this by having sort of an exchange program with 2 Asian cities that have actually developed their EAT action plans. So we want to learn from each other. And we are doing this with some doctors and health practitioners from Nairobi County. And we want to see and to learn from each other, to share experience and to say, how would an EAT action plan be? So that's basically what we're doing. But I think in my last slide, I was just talking about in developing these EAT action plans, something that I think is really critical is that it's really nice that it's demand driven, right? It's the communities understand, because with risk perceptions, if the communities don't understand why this information is important to them, why do they need it? It becomes sort of a one-way kind of a thing, so that it's just giving them the information. So I think co-production is very key. And especially in regions where EAT perceptions are quite low, where documentations are reporting and documentations are low as well. And even in regions where a lot of EAT impacts go unnoticed because people don't report it, because they don't actually even understand that this is linked to the particular heat they are experiencing in their city. So I think, and what we've done, especially in the informal settlements, is that we've used surveys. We've held a number of stakeholder workshops where we engage with these communities. We've explored ways in which we can strengthen dissemination of EAT early warnings so that it gets them in a timely manner, and they can use it in time as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And you've touched upon already the heat action plan, but it's good because we might go back to that earlier, but it's good that you already touched upon this because we have an idea about what is important in terms of heat action plan, and determining the threshold is one of the very important steps. We also heard from you, the lack of reporting, lack of documenting the impact, hence the lack of data. That is really a common thread, I would say, throughout this event. Let me now, thanks a lot for that, Joyce. Let me now turn to Nosheen. You're a professor of urban planning and a member of the WMO, World Meteorological Organization, and the WHO, World Health Organization. It's a technical advisory group of those both international organizations dealing with indoor heat risks to health. We don't necessarily think about indoor risk, but actually would be very interested to hear about those specific risks indoor and how they are specific to urban settings. So Nosheen, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. So I'll take about 5 minutes to talk about this and also with our previous speakers' excellent contributions. So first of all, I'd like to start off by thanking the Global Cities Hub and the IFRC for inviting me to be a part of this particular panel. And it's wonderful to see an all-female panel also. And hello, Bushra, good to see you again. And hello to my fellow panelists. So I want to start off first by distinguishing the dynamics of extreme heat along two lines. One, of course, is that we pay a great deal of attention to heat waves, which is a moment of acute heat, very high temperatures. But this is, of course, a momentary event that lasts for an X number of days or perhaps a couple of months, which is exactly what happened in Pakistan about a year and a half or so ago when we had back-to-back 2 months of heat waves that went on, and it was quite calamitous. And we are currently also, Pakistan is the region that I'm from, the country that I'm from, and a lot of my work focuses on that, but also extends to other parts of the world now. And secondly, the second component of extreme heat dynamics is chronic heat that we often don't think about, which is that it's seasonal and it's a dynamic that is also lasting longer. So in terms of the kind of work that my colleagues have done, I work for a public sector university in Pakistan, and I'm also the founder and director of the Karachi Urban Lab, and we put out a report on heat governance, the limits of heat governance in cities in South Asia, taking Karachi as a proxy and using 60 years of meteorological data to actually think about, well, how much has the city warmed? And one of the interesting things we found was that nighttime temperatures have actually gone up in very significant ways. So, and this is also in turn tied to chronic heat dynamics, where you see summers are coming earlier and lasting longer. So we can talk about acute heat, which is heat wave as events, and then the other part, which is also equally important, which is chronic heat. So the second aspect then takes me into this very, very important topic of indoor overheating. And so when we think about indoor overheating, we often, so we can think about residences. When I was looking at Dr. Kumitai's or Joyce's slides and those three different pictures that she juxtaposed, those are three different kinds of indoor environments where we look at low-income settlements to informal settlements to what are upwardly mobile gated communities and so forth. But there are other kinds of risks associated with indoor overheating in different kinds of environments. And these could be care homes, they could be health facilities, they could be schools, they are also prisons, for instance, right? So there is a plethora of different kind of indoor environments where overheating presents a very specific kind of danger that is often off the radar. And there is a widespread misunderstanding and lack of awareness about what safe indoor heat thresholds look like, essentially. And this also has to do with heat perceptions, but it also has to do with the kind of built environments that these variegated habitats are made up of, essentially. So why do we need safe indoor thresholds? So there are different kinds of components to this, right? So internal body temperatures could increase to dangerous levels. Heart rate increases during heat exposure, even if the internal body temperature does not increase to dangerous levels. Sweating during heat exposure can lead to dehydration if the individual does not drink a sufficient amount of water. Now, why is this pertinent to indoor overheating? So indoor environments could be a susceptible risk because in global southern cities, we don't necessarily have access to 24 hours of electricity or even 24 hours of clean water. So I know that in cities like Delhi and Karachi and even in Nairobi, where I have actually a project ongoing right now, load shedding, excessively long hours of being off grid, not even having access to solar panels, or generally 24 hours of electricity and clean water. All of this in turn relates to these infrastructure scarcities relate to this issue of indoor risks to overheating. And then tied with that are issues of ventilation. So if you're looking at certain kinds of habitats where ventilation, access to ventilation is limited, then you have the dangers of overheating that are also tied not only to health and safety risks, but risks associated with livelihood systems. So here I can give you an example, for instance, which are, domestic workers, female workers working indoors because they prefer to work at home on piece rate work bases. And there is an organization called Mahila Milan based in Mumbai that has done some very interesting work on the dangers of heat health associated with indoor environments. And they looked at a very small case study looking at female domestic workers and found that during high heat, when temperatures rise, domestic workers are affected very badly in terms of their health and their productivity because they're living in tiny spaces where infrastructural issues are rampant and ventilation is inaccessible. So women are impacted very, very badly. So their productivity falls and they can't work. So there are huge livelihood losses associated with that. And then we can also connect this, with establishing thresholds connected with indoor overheating risks, which have to do with air temperature, with humidity, air movement, potential solar loads, radiant temperature, potential level of physical activity, clothing insulation, and the heat sensitivity of populations, essentially, right? And ultimately, this then also dovetails with the complexity and nuances of establishing safe thresholds from overdoor in-heating, local climates, the time of year and levels of acclimatizations, the individual's age, sex, activity levels, etc. Now, who should be thinking about safety thresholds when it comes to overheating risks from indoors and generally outdoors also? And I can't think of more important actors than engineers, architects, builders, building operators, interior designers, and urban planners who are often left out of these conversations. So medical scientists very much on board, health scientists very much on board, but equally important in terms of getting these individuals on board along with local and national health organizations at the local level. So I will stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nosheen, for that. And, raising our awareness about indoor heat risk and who is particularly vulnerable. And again, women seem to be very vulnerable, in particular, female domestic workers, you mentioned. In preparing the event, we discussed, I really liked what the concept of thermal inequality that you used. Could you just briefly dwell on that, thermal inequality? And then, sorry, before you respond, I understand there are loads of questions on the Q&A. And I think some of them are directed to some of the panelists directly. So could you please, Bushra, Nosheen, Joyce, Ainur as well, have a look at those questions and see, if you could answer to them live, basically, so that people, get some elements of response, and we'll try to take some of them in the after we're done with the panel. But Nosheen, on the concept of thermal inequality, please.
Yes, thermal inequality slash thermal justice really basically means as we think of climate justice and climate inequality, but when we kind of home in on the thermal aspect and we start looking at extremes, whether they're related to heat or cold, that thinking about thermal inequality and thermal injustice means thinking in structural terms and bringing into conversation issues of intersectionality, of gender, of race, of caste, of religiosity, and all of these things, and spatializing thermal inequality and thermal injustice, that different people positioned in terms of their intersectionality are impacted differently in terms of these thermal dynamics. And there are very, very serious spatial components to this and issues of inequality tied to long histories of anti-poor urban planning and environmental injustice issues, basically as simple as that. And then really the core of it, that when we look at these thermal extremes, to think of them in terms of forms of structural violence that have to do with the kind of way in which the built environments becomes weaponized, especially in relation to extreme heat. Really as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nosheen. And I think you brought some elements, maybe not of response, but at least of, attracting attention to the fact that there are particularly vulnerable groups that are impacted differently. And it comes back into the question about the migrants, the poor, the women that were discussed earlier, and they all have, we must probably pursue differentiated strategies to address their needs in a very specific manner. Let me go back to Bushra, if you're still with us. Bushra, can you hear us? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
You told us earlier about, all the broad array of challenges that you're facing. What surprised me is that your position is ending soon, if I understand correctly. And next year, there will be no chief heat officers, although I'm sure your task will not be over. So how, what is being done to institutionalize heat resilience in Dhaka over the longer term?
Right. So next year, because I'm not funded by the city, this is an externally funded position. And the city currently doesn't have, like, it's not paying for a chief heat officer. It's not paying for an office of a chief heat officer. It is paying for some of the activities through the Department of Health or the Department of Environment. It's not funding heat directly. But I'm trying to change that. So at the same time as all of these activities are going on, we are slowly compiling kind of like writing a TOR for an external development fund, a development bank, to help us. ADB has been very supportive in this regard. They are recently very much focused on gender and heat stress, and we are working with them to see if it would be possible for them to finance a heat action plan for not just Dhaka North, but for the entire city, Dhaka North and South. I always say that Dhaka North and South is just an arbitrary concept. We live in one city. It's just so big with, as you said, at over 20 million people, that it was thought to be easier to have two separate municipalities. But in my personal opinion, that just made everything worse. Because if one city has a different type of mayor and leadership, and another city has a different leadership, but we are constantly, like, I go to Dhaka South almost every day. It's one city, so that is a challenge for sure. So we are trying to, when we institutionalize it, we also have to think about institutionalizing it for Dhaka South. So that we can all work together, so that the issues that Dr. Nausheen just pointed out, and I couldn't have said it any better. I had that language, the way she framed it, was so accurate and on spot that it is almost weaponized against the urban poor, and it's so tragic, and I refuse to let it go unaddressed. So that's why a lot of the things that we are really pushing forward won't just address thermal injustice or thermal inequality, but we are prioritizing vulnerable communities here in a way that hasn't been done before within the heat action plan. So a lot of focus on women, children, the transgender and intersex community, a lot of focus on people with disabilities, really highlighting how a lot of these marginalized communities are keep on being marginalized, and they're not really included in plans. Like, for example, there was a national, I'm just going to give you an example right now. Bangladesh recently released the national guideline for heat related illnesses, and it's a national level guideline. I was in stakeholder meetings, and I saw that there were no representative groups for the transgender community, no representative groups for people with disabilities. So we have a Center of Development for People with Disabilities. And that is a very prominent center, and no groups like that were included in these stakeholder workshops, although it was conducted at a national level. So we still have a long way to go when we talk about, and it was yet touted, I'm not going to say touted, but it was framed as very inclusive, and I don't think that it was as inclusive as it should have been. And, I really want to address that. So institutionalizing a heat action plan that actually prioritizes vulnerable communities and the structural policies that, imprison them within their circumstances, and, make it almost like a cyclical, a violent, a cycle of violence, almost like that is very intangible and very subtle, and it's not very noticeable unless you look at the long-term health impacts of the people within those areas that are constantly, deprived of access to power, deprived of access to, that have to travel a long way to get to work, or that don't have good schools nearby. You know, it all really is connected to heat, because
We lost you.
and sorry.
No,
Should I-
sorry. Yeah. Just finish.
Yeah, I'll just turn off my video. So yeah, I'd like to end with the fact that this will be the first heat action plan developed in the country of Bangladesh. And my vision is that within this heat action plan, it will be, yes, absolutely what I said about vulnerable communities that will be highlighted, but also the fact that the city itself and the city stakeholders themselves have to bring about change in their own individual organizations to incorporate heat resilience. So that means not, you know, simply having a chief heat officer in a city is not enough. You need a structure to support the activities. You need resources. You need dedicated mandates, and dedicated resources, dedicated people to run the multitude, the multiple projects and multiple concepts that there are so many things that we haven't really been able to address because of lack of resources. There's so many studies that need to be done. There are, again, I cannot stress enough about the population here, and 38% of our country, of our city, not country, but our 38% of the people living in Dhaka are living in informal settlements. A survey recently conducted by the UNDP showed 900,000 to almost 1 million households living in informal settlements, and the average family size was about 4 people. So if you just multiply that, I mean, you get almost 4 million people living in informal settlements. We recently, due to climate change, we are having so many young girls being married off, you know, before they're 18. And so it's just starting this, you know, whereas Bangladesh had really been able to address child marriages in the past, the rates had gone down, but we are seeing the rates soar back up with more and more storms, more and more cyclones, more salinity intrusion, more, you know, rising temperatures that are making agriculture really difficult. So these young children, these girls, they're being married off, and then they come to the city as climate migrants with their new husbands, or they're left there. You know, we're still working that out, but when the girls who are coming here, they have very little support. And when you think of extreme heat, you need the women in the family, you need women in living in urban poor households to be able to rest, to not cook and clean the whole day, and then, you know, stay up all night fanning their children or fanning their husbands while they sleep. You know, women need to have respite from heat, and that is something that we are really not seeing happen within urban poor communities in Dhaka. So I really, as chief heat officer, it is my until next year, it is going to be. I believe that I will consider myself successful if I have been able to develop a plan with the right stakeholders that addresses these issues in a very prominent way, and it's not just a footnote, and it's not just like a little annex. It needs to be the center of this entire plan. And then I will say goodbye. Yes.
Thank you, Busra. Thanks for that. And you somehow, in your response, have provided elements of answer to the questions about whether municipalities are handling heat issue from their own resources, or do they rely on private corporation money? And I think you've mentioned that your position actually was not funded directly by the city administration, but that you also mentioned the Asian Development Bank was chipping in. So, you know, there's probably a mix, and it depends on each different city situation.
Yeah, if I just may interject, I was funded by so my position is funded by the Arstruck Center, Arstruck Resilience Center. Yeah, so just putting that out there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not the Asian Development Bank, but indeed there are external resources that are helping out cities to handle heat in a more coherent, consistent manner. So this
Yeah,
has been, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because I just want to say that it is there's a lot of talk about and this is similar to what I said earlier, but there's a lot of talk about locally led adaptation. What that means is money.
Yeah.
And the city can't really access funds that easily because these channels don't exist. There is no, like, if I need money for a new road, then the city has thousands and thousands of tenders or thousands of paper, like it's already been done and it will happen just like that. But if I need money for a heat awareness campaign, if I need money for surveys, for data analysis, like the city is like how do we do that? Like it gets very, there's so many more restrictions. Like if I want to if I want to make an urban forest, the city has never done that before. It's so much more challenging than just pursuing the status quo. So we want to also address those things.
You underline a very important point about political willingness. It's easy to build roads and buildings, probably, but much less so when it comes to heat resilience. And again, it's a lot of work to change the mindset and to collect the data to be able to provide scientific evidence to your work. Sorry. Okay, all right. Ainur, I had promised at the very beginning that you would have some time to talk about the work that the movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent is doing to assist different countries and maybe cities as well, I'm not sure, on heat action plans.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for all the panelists for the really amazing input and ideas and insights you just gave us. Thank you so much for that. And you touched upon so many different aspects too, like starting from individual risk perception all the way to urban governance issues. And I couldn't agree more. It is a complex issue, and the extreme heat challenges that we are having is coming from all levels, right? And we have a huge built environment, building stock that is not built in almost nowhere in the world, maybe in some specific pockets, to really handle the increasing risk, especially in urban environments. So the solutions has to also be holistic and at all levels. So just want to put it out there because we need to think at different levels, not individual level, not just community level. So for us, we work at communities very closely, but our volunteers are a big asset, as you can imagine. They are distributing water, checking on isolated people, elderly, which is extremely important because a lot of people don't even think about that they need more water, or they don't have the energy to even go out and get food or water, and they suffer most. So checking on these isolated people with health conditions, or distributing water in public domains, but also setting up cooling centers or converting some of the public spaces to cooling centers, transporting outdoor workers like street vendors, some construction workers to these cooling centers for even few hours a day for them to get rest. Organizing information campaigns, awareness campaigns. These are things that we do at the community level, but there are things at different levels that we are also increasingly being part of. Meaning, if you think about a neighborhood level, creating spaces, green spaces, again, raising awareness, organizing communities to use spaces that are cool and available, opening it up to other people. There are tons of things you can do at that level. At the city level, city heat action plans already mentioned, and we are bringing in these community perspectives to these city heat action plans, and also facilitate a participatory process that brings all city stakeholders, communities, be part of the development of these city heat action plans. I put it in the chat. We did it in Nepal. Now we are expanding it to other countries like Bangladesh and other Honduras, Tanzania. So that's proved to be a very, very productive way of developing inclusive heat action plans. But we cannot and shouldn't stop at that level also, because there's so much that needs to be done at the policy level. Just how the building codes are designed. What does it say about how the built environment is designed and constructed? What kind of materials are done? These are all areas that we need to inform the policymaker, decision makers, whoever is developing these standards, architects, city planners. So it's in our agenda now to develop a built environment course, which will be open to public and professionals and public, about these materials and built environment features. Everything about the city, what the city is, the streets, how wide the streets, where the windows are facing, what's the size of the windows, everything affects not just the outdoor environment heat, but also indoor heat, which is extremely important. The other aspect is that we are also working with northern countries in which you see that the built environment is built for cold weather, and these cities are experiencing extreme heat, but their environment is not really suitable for that kind of heat. And I think there's a lot to learn, and we are facilitating that kind of exchange between cities so that everyone learns from each other. There's a lot also learned from migrants and displaced population, which find themselves sometimes in completely different climate and suffer a lot. But there's also a lot to learn from people coming from hotter environments. They have the solutions to. So it is, in short, it's everybody's problem. And we really need to talk to each other and learn from each other. And don't forget that we need science to back us up. So we need scientists like Joyce. We need cities, Dhaka. We need all kinds of from all levels input and support. We are happy to be an organization who is willing to and facilitating that kind of conversations.
Thank you. Thank
so-
you. For all those city administration that listen to us now, so you know you have a good partner in the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement there. So don't hesitate to contact, the National Society in your country. I know Joyce has to leave us. Do you want a few more? Do you want to react to a few points that have been made, Joyce? And then I'll give the floor to Nosheen. If you're still with us, Joyce? No, then I can see you, but oh.
Yes, I'm still here. And thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I have to rush. I have a flight to catch, and I have to be at the airport in like 30 minutes or so. I mean, it's really been an interesting discussion here. Thank you so much for the insights shared by Bushra, the amazing work you're doing in Dhaka. Anwar as well, the amazing sort of the explanation you gave on Indo pollution. That's amazing, and I really like the thermal injustice. I think you put it so nicely. I tried to explain that in my slide, but I think you really did justice to that. But I just want to come quickly to Ainur, and maybe we can take this up later in a chat or a conversation, or just email with you, because we are planning to develop these fast heat action plans in Kenya, and we want to do it in Nairobi. And this is sort of and I explained it in my slide, saying that we want to partner with some cities in Asia to just learn, to share experiences and learn from them. How do they do it? Because we're identifying cities where like have almost the same context with Nairobi, and so that we can sort of borrow experiences and learn from them. So I wanted to, maybe we can take it up later in a mail or something. But if we can get that kind of support, and even like learn from sort of cities that you've supported already to do such kind of work, it would really be amazing. Yeah.
Thank you, Joyce. And I think that was one of the questions that was raised, actually, if there's a database somewhere, somehow, about what cities do to beat the heat, basically, the action, the measures, the different heat action plan that already exists out there. I think it would be quite useful. I don't know about it, but maybe we can, I can make some research and go back to you. Nosheen, we're almost finishing, so a few points on your side as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Very, very quickly, there was a question in the Q&A section on informal settlements and what can be done to level up or scale up, make things better. So informal settlements, first of all, are not a problem. This is where the vast majority of the working class lives across cities in the global south, and they are very much a part of how we must accept and should learn to accept the fact that because there is no low-cost housing around these kinds of cities, informal settlements are a response to that. So very quickly, so there are active forms of cooling and passive forms of cooling. And generally people have a sense in their environments of what passive forms of cooling look like. And this is where, people might, in informal or low-income settlements, take measures through their own knowledge systems to promote or build in very small scale efforts that make a big difference in their lives. That might be in the introduction of a shade. It might be in the introduction of certain forms of indigenous plants that they themselves plant or get together as a collective of people or communities to launch certain kinds of operations. They could be small design features that are introduced at the local level within their homes or outside their homes. Now, the challenge over here is that how can local governments actually scale up these kinds of knowledges? This is the urban knowledge aspect that is so critical. And it also dovetails with what Bushra was talking about, that where on heat, especially where you have lack of knowledge at the local government level and the right kind of financial model to be able to implement that scales up this sort of knowledge and it's the kind of knowledge, urban knowledge, that will also feed into heat action plans that are community-led, that are really, really grounded. That is very important. So I would just point this out as a very, very small passive cooling design. What is passive cooling design? People often know it's not like people living in informal settlements are helpless. People do know. So how do we tap into this knowledge? This is very, very important and very critical. Thank you.
Thank you for this very important point, and that was one of the questions. So thanks for taking up that one. I'm sorry we haven't been able to take all those questions, but I hope there were quite, a few interesting things that you will retain from this event about the broad array of challenges that cities have to deal with, again, both in people's mind, but also within their own administration, where the question of heat resilience is somehow a new field, a new area, but that will take on importance as we move forward and as global warming impacts us more and more at the local level. Thanks, many, many thanks to all our panelists. The event has been recorded. It will be made available on our YouTube channel. We'll draft a news about this event to try to summarize everything that has been said. We also will try, I'm not sure, we've taken some of the questions and we'll try to get back to them as much as we can in the chat. I want to stop here because I know it's time. Put emphasis on the need for cities to embody political willingness within their own structure so that they have, the competencies, but also the resources and the capacity to act. And on that, of course, cities need to rely on your own resources, but national governments are also there, as well as external resources. Bushra has mentioned the Ashtrock Foundation, which has been very active, has been funding several heat officers worldwide. So have a look at their work and the different, the amount of resources that are available out there. Thank you so much to everyone, and I want to wish you a very nice afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.